We are at a tipping point in the way humankind inhabits the Earth. Depending on what we do next, this could be good news or bad. If we don't work together to fight threats to our existence such as climate change, if we don't act to end hunger, poverty, or change the ways we share and nurture our planet, if we don't care about how we treat each other or about equality and sustainability, then our lives and communities may well be in jeopardy. We urgently need to protect nature and its resources for future generations. As a first step, in 2000, world leaders ratified the Millennium Development Goals, or the MDGs, created to help focus on tackling some of the world's most acute problems. By 2015, we had made significant progress in areas such as gender parity in primary education, reduction in child mortality, access to piped drinking water. However, indigenous peoples were left behind, and much remains to be done if we are to uplift those still in poverty, marginalized, and discriminated, and achieve sustainable development for all. In 2015, the successor to the MDGs was agreed following a global consultation with over 150 world leaders and with major civil groups including indigenous peoples under the umbrella of the World We Want. The result is the Sustainable Development Goals, also referred to as the 2030 Agenda or the SDGs. This ambitious set of goals is a guide and framework for what we collectively must achieve over the next 15 years to bring about a fairer and sustainable world. The SDGs are comprehensive in their objectives and scope. They include all nations, rich and poor, and promote partnership, collaboration, and participation of all citizens. The 2030 Agenda commits to leave no one behind, particularly the poorest and the most marginalized of our communities. The 2030 Agenda comprises of 17 ambitious goals promoting sustainability, empowerment, equity, and respect for human rights. Let's look at each of the goals. No poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry innovation and infrastructure, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace, justice, and strong institutions, partnerships for the goals. These are the Sustainable Development Goals. But there are cautions too for our indigenous societies. The goals of economic development and industrialization must be managed carefully to avoid violation of indigenous land rights and ensure equitable use of resources. Currently, countries are creating new national development plans with a commitment to inclusion and participation. As indigenous peoples, we must engage in these national discussions and decisions. This is a unique opportunity for indigenous peoples to confirm our place in the future of the planet and not to be left behind. Who are we? There are more than 370 million indigenous peoples throughout the world. We manage many different ecosystems and traditional occupations. Where can you find us? Plains, grasslands and tundra, oceans, deserts, forests, mountains, The SDGs are relevant and applicable to the world's indigenous peoples directly and as a contributor to their success. They create a framework that will guide governments, private sector, and civil society to create a better world and mutually beneficial relationships with and for indigenous peoples. We, as indigenous peoples, have been conserving our resources sustainably for centuries, not only for our survival, but also as part of our identities, culture, and well-being of humanity and the planet. These must continue to be protected, ensuring that indigenous peoples and our ways of life form a core element of our common future. What do we as indigenous peoples require in order to take part in meaningful ways? Education, capacity building, partnerships with governments based on the respect for our rights and trusted partners, a place at the negotiating tables at national, regional, and global levels. Disaggregation of data based on ethnicity. Without properly collecting and filtering data, indigenous peoples could be misrepresented or simply remain invisible. Indigenous peoples need to be part of reporting and review processes from national to global platforms. Already, initiatives are being put into place to address this, such as the Indigenous Navigator, which monitors the level of recognition and implementation of their rights. The SDGs already have shoulders to stand on in the form of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and other UN instruments. These should be fully integrated into the SDGs implementation, particularly involving indigenous peoples' land rights and cultural integrity. What do we as indigenous peoples have to offer? Indigenous knowledge and innovations, sustainable food production and food security, knowledge and values for sustainable living, cultural diversity, conflict prevention, conservation of forests, natural resources, and biodiversity, medicines, handicrafts. What is the world that we want?
We want dignity and non-discrimination.
Land rights now! Land rights now!
Education period is very important to indigenous people.
Access to indigenous education.
Recognizing the contributions of indigenous peoples in sustainable development.
Good health and well-being. It is really the essence of being connected to your lands, languages, your culture.
Halting the destruction of our habitat and territories. Empowerment of and respect for the rights of indigenous women, youth, and indigenous persons with disabilities.
The whole sustainable development goal should be focused that no one will be left behind, and it's also that nothing about us without us.
We as indigenous peoples have so much to give to the future diversity and security of the planet. The SDGs will not achieve their aims without the effective participation and inclusion of indigenous peoples. Find out more and what you can do by visiting our website.